They instituted a three-point plan to win: send as many forces as needed to stop getting destroyed by 1966, then go on the offensive and push in hard as to wear the Viet Cong out. If that failed, they would keep pushing for the next year or so. And so, Phase 1 began. The US called upon SEATO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, to help out, and most countries could smell the stinky communists nearby and didn't like it one bit. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the Philippines all joined in the fighting. Fighting was brutal, as the US machinery was faced up against an enemy barely visible to the naked eye. While the US brought the big guns, the Viet Cong had the lay of the land while the young Americans had no idea where to shoot. A big part of the guerrilla warfare were tunnels dug underground by the Viet Cong to allow them to appear and disappear at a moment's notice. This is where we saw the true harshness of the war, as American infantry were dropped into these tunnels in complete darkness and alone, armed with only a pistol with the aim of blowing the tunnel up or causing some other mess down there. Booby traps were also commonly used by the Viet Cong and placed in strategic points around the jungle. Not only did you have to keep an eye out for the treetops, the huts, the rocks, the vines, that one monkey that keeps staring you down oddly, but now you also have to learn to identify very well hidden traps in the ground. These included tripwires with big balls of stone and or blades that swung in and killed whoever triggered it, all the way back to the basic spiked pits in the ground filled with urine and poop, to make sure that if you don't die impaled, you die from infection and disease. To make matters somehow worse, the American offensive was slow and sometimes could not even move past heavily defended jungle areas. The Viet Cong saw this as an opportunity to strike back. In 1968, they launched the Tet Offensive, which no one was ready for. More than 80,000 troops launched huge attacks against the South. While being caught with their pants down, the South and US troops were not completely lost, as their counterattacks were very effective now that the Viet Cong didn't have many tunnels or traps to hide behind. Back home, however, things were not looking good for Johnson. With the new hippies and their slogan, "Make Love Not War," they were not big fans of the war and demanded the troops be returned home. US involvement became a cloudy subject as unarmed men and women were being massacred by US troops. Peace negotiations began in Paris in 1968, which stopped the bombing over North Vietnam. In 1969, Richard Nixon won the elections and inherited the issues of the war. At home, it grew more and more unpopular, while in Vietnam, US progress was small and unsubstantial, and they faced the very real possibility that they could actually not win this war. Nixon began sending some troops home that same year, with the idea of using South Vietnamese troops as replacements. Ho Chi Minh died that year too. In 1970, Cambodia began its civil war and saw US bombings. In response, to support their side, the North invaded Cambodia. The South followed suit. Seems like the war was not winding down, but coming to its dramatic climax. In 1971, in another attempt to cut off northern access to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the South launched an invasion of Laos, which failed miserably. More and more bad press was made about US involvement, how they were losing the war, how they treated citizens, and many more topics were shown to the public, further damaging the already disastrous situation. In 1972, another offensive was launched by the Viet Cong, forcing the US to rebomb North Vietnam. While this did end the offensive before more damage was done, this confirmed the destruction of their peace treaty made in Paris all those years ago. Luckily, the bombings did affect the North so much that in 1973, more peace talks opened up, ending in a complete halt of US advancements in Vietnam, and by March, all American ground troops were removed and sent home. This caused a total collapse of the South. First, their economy took a huge hit. Next, in 1975, the North launched what would be their final offensive. Pressing hard with all they had, they captured key cities like Hue with ease, cities that were so heavily defended a few years back. On the 30th of April, 1975, the Viet Cong raised their flag in Saigon, the South's capital. In 1976, the North and South were combined into the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, a communist regime. What would have happened if the US had not removed its troops? What if the US had succeeded in cutting the Viet Cong's access to the Ho Chi Minh Trail? What if their offensive had actually worked? Would the American public view on the war be different? Could they have succeeded in containing communism in Indochina? So many questions, so little brain cells.